Hey, to all the managers and leaders out there, your role is like being a maestro, conducting a collection of different people, challenges, and triumphs. It's not always easy, we know that, to keep everyone in harmony, but when it works, it's pure symphony. So join us by the virtual water cooler as we share learnings and strike the right chord for success together. Hey, Dana.
How you doing?
Well, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I am getting ready to embark on my first St. Patrick's Day in Boston. And obviously, I'm very excited because I'll get to see you.
Yes.
But having said that, do you have any tips for any first timers for St. Patrick's Day in Boston?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all,
This is the part of the episode where it's travel with Dana and Rose.
travel with Dana and Rose. Well, first of all, you are staying in a newer section of Boston called the Seaport, which, as far as I can tell, is known for raucous St. Patrick's Day,
Oh,
shenanigans and ballyhoo.
okay.
So I think you're in the right spot.
Oh, yay.
There is also, some people might know, it's actually a separate city called South Boston that has a parade.
We will be going.
Okay. All right. So you will just have so much fun people watching at that. And maybe we should do a debrief on this podcast after you have done that. But bear in mind that certain people will be just lit like Christmas trees at 11 a.m.
Okay. And I'm getting some very intentional attire.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. Because I can't go to St. Patrick's Day in Boston and not have the right outfit.
Do you want to share what it is?
Well, one that can accommodate the ballyhoo.
Right.
But also be somewhat participative in the intent of the holiday. So it's got to have the right colors. Maybe a color scheme with a bit of humor.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to see.
And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, okay, Rose. Shocker. Lots of comments and interest in the feedback episodes we've done. So we are adding yet another. And this has two general focus areas. One is about delivering growth-oriented feedback. So it's not kind of like the previous episodes where we've talked about real course correction, like behavioral. It's more about they're doing well.
Or real time, or the real time example. Yep.
Yeah, we did that. This is more about they're doing great. It's just there's more they need to know and understand in order to progress. So I thought there's interest in that. And so I thought we'd open with that.
Oh, and I have another one.
Oh my God, it's happening real time, folks.
I have another one. I think just this is a reflection and some comments that I received. People, they got the let me prepare, and they got these are all action-oriented people that are listening to podcasts because they want to improve themselves. So they get the next steps. What they're really concerned about is the messy middle.
Yeah.
So how about if they cry? How about if they yell? How about if they say nothing and stare at you?
Yeah.
That's actually the worst.
That really is. Yeah. And what if they're like, well, this is all because you're such a bad manager?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Or, thank you for the feedback. I will be talking to HR. That's always a good one too. Yeah.
Good. There's also the response that it's you're totally right. Absolutely. Totally. Gonna work on that. Absolutely.
Are we done?
Yeah, exactly. It is that just they're yesing you just so that it's all over. So yeah. So we're going to talk about the messy middle a bit.
So what do you want to hit first? Let's hit growth.
Let's do that. And let's just reflect back to the fact that it's so important to remember feedback is a conversation between two people. And it's a conversation that is a beginning, middle, end. And so let's talk about the beginning, but Rose, more in the frame of growth-oriented feedback or developmental feedback.
So can I set the stage maybe? So you're getting ready to meet with potentially maybe one of your star performers, someone that you really, really want to do. Not that you wouldn't do this with all your performers, so don't assume that. But you really want to give them what the next steps are going to be to help them improve. Okay, so that's easy to do. Actually, that's the easier part. The tougher part is and progress.
Okay. And what is that? What do you mean by that?
How do I get my next job? Because that's often the response. The response is, thank you for the feedback, but in the context of continuing to grow their career, not just their personal skill set, but also their career. So maybe we can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I will say that that is a primary reason people have anxiety about development oriented conversations because the managers are like, but they're just going to ask me how they can get a promotion and I can't promise them that and et cetera, et cetera.
Oh,
So
let's talk about that. Yeah.
yeah, it'd be great. And then,
Because we
like you
talked
said,
about that on how you do it when you're asking for the
when you're
promotion.
asking for it.
Now we can talk about how about when you're asked. So another interesting angle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's do it. Let's drive in. Drive in.
We can drive in.
So Rose, we talked about the importance of an opening and being specific and so on. So how, like when you think of your career and giving people growth oriented, improvement to get to the next level kind of thing, how have you approached it?
Yeah, and I'm not going to role play, but what I will say is I've often started in those situations with and this might be wrong, by the way, because we haven't scripted this one either.
Probably. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, maybe with like all of the fabulous results that they've delivered. Like, here's your last quarter. We know that this is your development conversation. So here's what you delivered. So let's talk about what we need to do to continue to grow and develop. So I often start with positive news because it's a very different tone of conversation.
Yeah, and I had someone say something similar to me once, a manager saying, like, I just see a lot of runway for you here at the organization. Like, there's a lot you could progress and go do. And that helped prime me. But
And how did you feel when they said that? Were you listening? Were you have like both ears? You weren't defensive.
No, and that's what I was about to say. Like again, though, you're still giving the person that micro moment to prepare. Like if you haven't teased it ahead of the meeting and you're just bringing it up, it's still so important to give them that moment to get into a frame of mind. And you did that very well with that opening.
Yeah, and then I would just get into obviously these ones you really, 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 believe it or not, have to prepare equally as hard. Why? Because you want to give them feedback that will truly allow them to continue to grow and develop. And it could be as simple as, well, it could be as simple as a domain that they need to build, financial,
particular
business,
expertise, right.
technical. It could be behavioral, meaning how to be more proactive versus responsive, depending on where they're at in their career, how to take a chance or a risk. Or it could be you've kind of we need to find you your next gig.
Right.
If we
Yeah,
want to
you've, like,
continue to,
maxed and
yeah, you've kind of
yeah.
maxed out in this role.
Can I give you a good example of that really quickly?
Sure.
Which was it was both like course correction, but framed in a developmental way. I remember this guy in one of my workshops sharing how he'd been promoted. He was given this great opportunity to go pitch some ideas to the leadership team. His boss was in the room as part of that leadership team. He pitched his ideas. The leaders were very critical of them, kind of crapping all over his ideas, sort of. And he got really like pissy and bratty about it and kind of sulked and whatever. And then it was not a good look. And then when he left the meeting, his manager was like, can we talk about that meeting and whatever? And she said, listen, I wouldn't have, she framed it so brilliantly. She was like, I wouldn't have given you this job if I didn't know you could do it. You've got what it takes. That said, the way you behaved in there is not going to make you successful. And in fact, you have now damaged your credibility a bit. You've also made people look at me like you hired him, like you promoted him. And so she said, so we need to talk about how you're going to get this sort of back on track because you've got some credibility building now you have to do if you're going to succeed. And I thought that was a brilliant way to frame what was probably some like unprofessional or at least immature behavior in the context of like, I believe in you and you can do it. And by the way, you got to dig yourself out of a hole. So let's talk about how to do
Yeah, so that was growth feedback that went awry a bit. And that they went and did what the boss said they were going to do, and then they did it poorly. So the feedback for growth was there, because as we're talking about how we're providing growth feedback, it then led to a situation where the feedback needed to be real time to pivot back into a growth scenario.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like as a boss, you might not you promote someone, you know they've got raw talent, whatever, and I'm sure it never occurred to his boss that he was going to have this sort of sulky, immature reaction. And so it's like, "Oh, wow, data point. We need to talk about this if you're going to be successful in this
And that
job."
needs to be real time.
Yeah, and it was.
That needs to be real time. Any other thoughts or tips on that growth conversation where, I really see runway for you, and here's what I would like you to do.
Yeah,
Either
yeah. I think the one thing I would say is a lot of times that's about making them aware of things they might not know, right? And that so many times people come up through a very specific technical niche. And by technical, that could be accounting, that could
right,
be
right.
recruiting, that could be whatever. And you reach a point where having like a lot of depth is only going to get you so far. And now you need to build your understanding of the functions and the groups that you work with and so on. But we're not born understanding that, right? Like it doesn't necessarily occur to people that, oh, for me to be able to progress and hopefully get promotions and whatever, I need to start building my breadth of understanding,
Your
not just
lattice
depth.
versus your ladder.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I would say sometimes it's just helping them understand what it takes that they might not even realize.
So as a manager, what does that mean? For me, it meant keeping your eye out for opportunities that will allow them to build the breadth, looking for projects, new roles, opportunities within your own organization where they can build the breadth versus just the depth. And that could be breadth and domain or breadth of experience, meaning here's an opportunity to learn about another organization through a project, or here's an opportunity to build a skill set by leading a bit of a cross-functional team versus just an exercise or an activity in an area that you're comfortable with.
Yeah,
Because the
exactly.
growth will come in the discomfort.
Yeah, and those are the things that, like, when giving developmental feedback, you might want to, have that meta conversation. Like, I'm looking out for these types of opportunities for you because of this. Here's why.
And to reflect back on our last conversation, as a manager and a leader, you've got to walk the talk. So you have to be looking out for those opportunities that allow them to build the behavioral or the domain breadth.
And then you get into the whole retention of your high performers, right? And if they're a high performer, probably within a year and a half, they might be getting a little bored of their job. And so how are you going to keep them challenged and wanting to stick around?
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about the messy middle.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're bouncing. It could be the middle of a development conversation, or it could be the middle of a more
Feedback
of a course
conversation.
correct.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Like,
Or
well, they're
real
all
time.
feedback. They're all
Yep.
feedback, but
Yep.
it's like course correct.
I meant real time
Yeah,
feedback. Yeah.
And so I call it the messy middle because that's what everybody's most anxious about. It's one, how do I bring this up so that the conversation is productive? I don't want them to be angry, or I don't want them to be upset, or I do know them as a person and I know they've had some hard times personally, and I don't want to, you know what I mean? And so you sort of like really worry about how are they going to react. And that's a completely human reaction. There's no way we're not going to worry about that. And so one, Rose, it ties back to the other episode where we're like, you got to prepare so that you do know that you can bring it up in a way that's respectful and sets the conversation up for success. But then you really, you can't own how they're going to react. You can just do your best to bring up the topic in a productive way. And so I said, maybe this is all happening because you're a bad manager.
So what else? What could be the reactions? You're a bad manager. I'm going to call HR. I disagree with you. I can't believe you told me this. I'm so angry. I am so disappointed in myself. I start to cry.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I know I suck. I know I'm horrible. I don't even know why I have this job. Like it could go that way.
Yeah. So all of those I've experienced, just
Right,
FYI. So they
right.
are likely to happen
Yeah, they are. Although
if
I
you're going
will
to manage
say,
for a long time.
exactly.
Yeah.
If you manage for a long time, I definitely not every feedback
Oh
conversation
God, no.
devolves.
No.
Like please keep that in mind.
Right.
But if you do get some of these extreme things, one is just listen to the extent that you can. I'm not talking about attacks, but if someone's like, I know I've been really struggling and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's a great opportunity to be like, help me understand, tell me more, all of that. And however, the ones, well, this is all because you're a bad manager, or this is because Sue in Department X never gets me her stuff on time. So what am I supposed to do? Right? That some of those, especially the you're a bad manager, could be what's called a very human tendency to rail the conversation. So I don't want to talk about this, which could be true. So I'm going to derail. I'm going to try to derail, but I wouldn't say it's always conscious. It's just sort of this like natural defense mechanism that we have. And so there's a couple things. I like to think of them as the R's. One is rephrase. So that's simply paraphrasing back what you're hearing. And just understand that paraphrasing and rephrasing doesn't indicate agreement. It indicates that you're listening to what they're saying. So I'm hearing that you have some frustrations with how I'm acting as your manager. Yes, I do. Then I would say, like, park it, meaning, okay, I would actually like to hear about that. That said, right now, I want us to continue exploring what I've brought up because it's really important to your success. So I promise you, we can have another meeting about X or Y. So whatever they're bringing up, that's a real sidetrack, that's a real like taking you way off topic, just hear it and park it. Now, to your point though, you've got to follow up and do it. Like you have to say, all right, like I would like to hear from you about X or Y. If it's it's all because Susie won't get me her stuff, I think you have to explore that. Find out if it's a sidetrack or if it genuinely is derailing their work. So again, some of these things come up, and it might actually be really good data, and it might be like being delivered in an intense way. But if you can sit with it,
And something you may have to do some follow up on. Again, you have to take action. You're going to have to take some action. Hey, I have a question because I know what I would answer. I'm anxious to see what you would answer. How about if they say, I'm sorry, I can't accept this. I'm going to go to HR.
Right. Yeah. Then you say, okay, if that's what you feel you should do, that's absolutely your right.
Yeah. I would say, I have their number. Would you like me to call them?
There you go. There you go. I think that's the sort of snappier way. We just said the exact same thing. So yes. Yeah.
And so those situations do happen, right? People do get defensive. And I think I had mentioned in the last episode where I had a situation like that. Person was not accepting the feedback, was very angry about it, started to make statements about other people in the organization and justify the behavior. Again, in some cases, very natural tendency when the feedback, because it was tough feedback. I will be clear. I went in knowing I was giving some very, very difficult feedback. And like I said in the last episode, it didn't end great immediately. Like it took some time to settle in. And I will tell you that years later, it is a fabulous relationship that has stood the test of time, that came back around as appreciative for providing tough feedback. Because if people are truly interested in their development, they want feedback. They might not like it at the time. The problem is most of their managers have such a difficult time providing it. They don't get it, so they don't improve.
Yeah. Or they sort of improve to a point, it gets overlooked for a while, and maybe they even get promoted, but you're gonna reach a point where it just can't be ignored anymore. And you just bring up a great point, Rose. One thing I will say is just gonna have to find your ways to keep redirecting the conversation on what you brought up. And so just
it's a great point.
Learn how to be like
hunker in.
Yeah. And again, it really is human nature to want to deflect. So this is one of those like judgment calls where you have to feel your way through. Like, are they giving you actually legitimate sort of insight into what's going on that's actually important for you to understand? Or is it just they're just trying to sidetrack it? So derail the conversation so you can't proceed. And so you've got to find your way to like stick with it.
In these difficult scenarios, Dana, how do you wrap them to transition on to how you're going to close and make it actionable?
Yeah. So there's a few things. One is if someone has become exceptionally wrapped up in emotion, any kind of emotion, to the extent where you don't think the conversation can be productive anymore, there's no shame in saying, like, let's pick this up tomorrow, right? Like it's in other words, like forcing it to next steps when the person is sobbing is obviously not, and so there's just no, you have to follow up, right? But there is no problem in calling a timeout, first of all. So
Okay.
it's critical to follow up and close the conversation with next steps. There is also, if you sort of legitimately feel like they have given you insights into the situation that you didn't know, that's revising how you're thinking about this, you can also say, like, you know what?
I'm going to
You've
look
helped
into that.
Yeah, you've helped me understand a lot more about what's going on. And I want you to know, like, I want to hear more. And there's some things that I'm going to look into. That said, regardless of this, we still need to make sure X or Y is on track. So can we talk about that? But I want you to know, like, there are things I want to understand more based on what you've shared with me.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for your perspective. I'm going to do some additional
Yeah.
discussions have some additional discussions around this. Yeah.
And how can we, but not
But
and,
yes,
and let's make sure X, Y, or Z though is on track or something like that. I also want to highlight again, if something gets really unmanageable and you do think you need to just call a timeout, there's nothing wrong with bringing in support. Like, I don't know I worked as an HR partner, and certainly in the organization I worked, it was expected the manager would be handling the initial feedback and hopefully taking it to completion. But if I got a call and said, like, I did this, I tried to do everything right, it just did not go well, I think it would be helpful if you could be in on the next discussion. That's fine. So you could also reach out and grab some support if it's needed.
And I will say, just to add to that,
Or a
and
manager.
this is on an exception basis. It wasn't very frequent, but over 33 years, maybe a handful of
Right.
times,
Yeah.
based on the severity of the topic, there were situations where I insisted HR would be in the room
Right.
with me.
And there's always that too. So
Yeah.
so that's the other thing, that if you are remotely worried that there could be something really sensitive going on, like, trust that gut and either talk to your manager or talk to HR and be like, would it make sense for you to be present? I think.
And then the other alternative, or it's not a but it's an and, is that if it is a difficult conversation and it's your first one, or it's your 100th, and you're concerned about your delivery, your HR organization is there to assist you to help you prepare for that conversation, even if they're not going to be in the room. So run your notes by them, run your approach by them, and get some feedback.
I would strategize with people all the time.
Yeah.
By the way, both managers and employees would call me and be like, I want to talk to my manager about this. Can you help me think it through?
And I will tell you, if you go back to why do we give feedback? We give feedback because the intention is to help someone develop and improve. You want to do a good job with it.
Yeah. And the other thing that's important is if they're causing disruption, it's really not just about them anymore. It's about their impact on other people on the team or whatever. And you owe it to everyone involved to give clear, timely feedback so that all these different impacts that could be happening get addressed. And the other thing is, we're human, and there will be times that our emotions pretty jacked based on what's coming at us. And so we just have to be mentally prepared for that and be able to manage that. So again, so that the conversation stays respectful Okay, Rose. So we've covered rephrase, which is just paraphrasing, reflecting back what you're hearing. We've covered redirect, which is they're going to try to get you off track and you got to redirect the conversation to the point. There's also reality check, which is when people deny something. It could be like in our previous episode, when so and so was talking, you rolled your eyes and they'll be like, no, I didn't. And again, you just have to focus on I was there and I did observe you doing that. You might not have realized it, but I did see you do it. And then if they keep saying, nope, I didn't do it, be like, well, it's very interesting how our perceptions of that are so different.
Yeah, and the
yeah.
other thing that I would add to reality check, that's what you call it, right? Reality check is when I've tried what you just stated and I would still continue to get feedback. I would get peer input. So I would proactively solicit feedback from others that I could document and share with them. And then there was one instance with an employee where that didn't even work because they didn't agree with the input that others had provided. So I went as far as to bring in an external third party to monitor, collect feedback, and deliver it. So it came from multiple sources in a very formal, documented manner. So that reality check process can take on multiple forms and multiple levels. So I love that.
And last reality check is also the person who's like, whatever, it's not that big a deal. And that's where you just got to loop back to that impact. So reality, I mean, you might not use the word reality check, but you can be like, well, it is a big deal because this is happening and that's happening and that's happening. So you just loop back to impact.
So what are your hot takes, Dana?
Oh, Lord. We covered a lot. Yeah, I think just that the messy middle is there are ways to handle it. Paraphrase, redirect, acknowledge maybe there's something else that's worth talking about. But right now we're going to close on this before we do X. So just sort of have your strategies ready to help that conversation keep moving forward productively.
I would say don't be afraid to leverage your HR organization, number one, and stay focused on the intent of the conversation, which is the individual receiving the growth feedback. So, and with that, we thank you for another episode. Follow, like, subscribe, and we'll see you soon.
And feedback is a gift, y'all.
Feedback is a gift.